title of our episode today is the EPA. The EPA was formed by Richard Nixon out of political necessity. We'll go to that in a minute, but firstly, I should say, we'll update you on the latest from the earth breaking, I suppose you'd call it, in the U.S. News on Tuesday, the firing of the Attorney General Comey. Comey was terminated by DJ Trump, claiming that he mishandled the Clinton email probe. Now, this is from the Washington Post, and it is one of these stories that will have to be given the opportunity to see the light of the sun and cure itself. Now, the development comes as Comey was leading. Now, this is where it is very interesting. Leading a counterintelligence investigation to determine whether associates of DJ Trump had coordinated with the Russian Federation to interfere with the 2016 presidential election. Now, it is not clear, and this is incidentally by David Barrett here and Philip Rocca. Not immediately clear how it would affect it. Well, part of the problem here, in the 70s, the Watergate era, we had what was called the Saturday Night Massacre, where Richard Nixon fired a number of people, including the special prosecutor Archibald Cox. Archibald Cox was a leading legal scholar, Professor Cox. But this would have been the Tuesday massacre by the recommendation supposedly of Beauregard Sessions, otherwise known as the Little Colonel, the Attorney General. Now, according to the mouthpiece, Sean Spencer, DJ Trump had received a recommendation from the Attorney General. Doesn't mean anything. That's completely politicized. The firing was effective immediately. But the problem was in Comey was in L.A. on a recruiting trip. In other words, he was out of Washington and on the West Coast. Now, this is definitely political. Director Comey was appointed by Barack Obama to a 10-year term. There was a history in the U.S. We had a long-serving director from the Roaring Twenties named J. Edgar Hoover, and J. Edgar Hoover was around for many years into the 70s, and there was a new director appointed, several of them. Sessions was one, and not related, as far as I know, to this character that's now the Little Colonel. And then there was the Freeze, conservative Catholic who was a Democrat. There have been a number of them there, and when his term expired, and there was somebody after Freeze. Anyway, in the 70s, there was a fellow named L. Patrick Gray, if I recall correctly. He was the FBI director. He came under increasing cannon fodder also. But the whole Watergate story revolved around somebody called Deep Throat, a little bit different, and it was criminal activity of the committee to re-elect the president, or CREEP, as it was called. This was basically one series of events. The difference in this particular situation, you have numerous events going on. The Russian influence that there was in the 2016 election. Did they coordinate with DJ Trump's campaign and various people involved in his campaign? And secondly, cronies of DJ Trump that had business interests or have in the Russian Federation. There is one particular situation there. And then there's numerous other things. What did DJ Trump know, and when did DJ Trump know it? DJ Trump's evidently hired a private attorney. But that is on the legal side of the matter. He publicly accused Director Comey of giving Hillary Clinton a free pass. Now, this in itself doesn't work out very much. The Assistant Attorney General Rod Rosenstein we did a show today on this, laid out the rationale behind the dismissal and attributed to the handling of the Clinton case. But the problem is, beyond the Clinton case, Comey and the FBI actually going into an investigation at the heart of DJ Trump himself. That in itself creates problems. And of course, obviously, the question you asked was the investigation, that Comey counterintelligence investigation, was that what happened? There's the legal aspect, or the quasi-legal aspect, these various committees that are investigating, and there's also a grand jury and panel, but there is also the political ramifications, and this is where Washington has imploded. Because presidents are subject to different rules when you talk about the political. It's called impeachment. In high crimes, misdemeanors, you could impeach a president if you have the votes for eating a banana. I mean, it's virtually that simple. Bill Clinton was impeached by the House, tried by the Senate, and acquitted at the trial. Old Strom Thurmond himself carried that one out. So there's a situation going on here from Richard Burr, a very conservative Republican senator. He heads the Senate Intelligence Committee. He's also examined it. His statement is, I found a Director Comey to be a public servant of the highest order, and dismissal further confuses an already difficult investigation by the committee. There are multiple calls by Democrats for an appointment of a special prosecutor. That law had expired, but they can, as they say, reignite it. The leader, Schumer, I do not have confidence in him. James Comey any longer then acted so drain the swamp to President. Oh, this is sorry here. This is a totally different situation. Anyway, this Rothstein here, or Rothstein, is the assistant director. Rothstein was critical of Comey's decision to reverse in late October that Clinton's email probe had resumed, and dismissed the recent defense the FBI's directed to the Congress. But this is more about a different story, and from senior Democrats like John Conyers. John Conyers was around and was on the Watergate committee, compared Tuesday development to the Watergate scandal, and said the action reeks of cover-up and appears to be part of an ongoing effort by DJ Trump's White House to impede the investigation into Russian ties and interference in our election. Well, part of the problem here is beyond that, because not only do you have the FBI's counterintelligence service involved, but you also have these other intelligence services involved, the CIA, the National NSA, etc., and numerous ones we don't know of. Information gathered there. So this is not just a Watergate-type burglary where they were able to get Deep Throat and John Dean there and some more people. It's a possibility those people will come up. But the cloud has literally descended upon the White House of DJ Trump. Now, they did notify the Congress of Comey's last day, but that really causes nothing but confusion. Again, you have a quote-unquote divided nation, but it's very important to remember that the administration that is in the White House now is a minority election. It is literally administration, I should say. It was elected not by a majority of the people on the popular vote. They did win the electoral vote, but that was given to roughly about 80 votes in free states, the state of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Now, the Post goes that there's several ways here. Karen DeYoung is writing here. Comey-Farr and Nixonian are uniquely Trumpian. Well, not a Trumpian situation as such. Now, remember, Trump had a reality TV show that he was on, The Apprentice. Never watched the show, fortunately. But now so these things are playing out. Now, again, the Comey removal sparks fear about the future of the probe. Now, again, that probe will go on because the political pressure is there. It doesn't matter what happens. From John McCain, known as the old man McCain, disappointed in the decision, repeated his call for a special congressional committee. That would be like the Watergate committee coming up there. So, in other words, you have those types of things, and the wild card is during the Watergate era, we did not have a social media. Now, we had some remnants of talk radio out there, but this is not a talk radio matter, period. So this is what, and you have these kinds of things going on. Some analysts note it's odd that Rothstein did not mention in his memo Department of Justice Inspector General, a guy named Horowitz, is conducting his own investigation into Comey. So there are a lot of investigations going on here, period. Rothstein, this is it, did not state whether his memo was based in part on an investigation or was consistent with the findings. That is from David Cunningham. So we have a lot of things going on here, a lot of talk. This is in the early stage of this particular situation. And when you have things that have to be sorted out in the days and weeks that will continue. Now, if you recall, this event surrounding the Russian Federation has been around pre- and post-election, and it will continue to be around now. It's just that there will be more pressure to move on, period. Let me get to the healthcare situation, then we'll go to finally the EPA. Lion Ted Cruz is at the middle of the healthcare operational attempt. He says it was late. Oh, well, we won't get it all that where he is. But basically, that revolves around 50 votes in a chamber with only 52 Republicans. Now, if they fail to get 3 Republicans, they are probably doomed. Portland of Ohio and, of course, Cory Gardner of Colorado. They have state expansion of Medicaid out there, and that in itself causes problems. John Foon, he's from, where is he from? South Dakota. He's working on some part of it. Lisa Mikoski here from Alaska, and of course Susan Collin in particular could become thorns there. They could. She's a leading critic. This is Collin of Maine. And then you have Dr. Bill Cassidy. He's expressed concern. He's from Louisiana. He used to be a doctor at the Charity Hospital. So, I mean, all these things in the healthcare situation. And this was one reason we at this mic had put forth the idea about this whole Russian thing, that it was a side issue. We want to get Medicare going, and it still could be a side issue. It's very, very difficult when you had Admiral, what was his name there? The used to be head of the CIA, saying he had seen no evidence. Now, we don't know if he saw classified evidence. He would not talk about that, period. So you have all these characters in here, and then you have the Budget Finance Committee, Easel of Wyoming, and Orrin Hatch. They're out of it because those are Republicans from these very, very small states. Barrasso of Colorado, and anyway, that's Toomey in Pennsylvania. Some of these characters that have just been reelected are not into danger. But we had a situation. Ron Bloom, he's from Iowa. He held a press conference. He walked out of his press conference, and his town meeting was a disaster for him in a conservative district. So this is one of the things that happens when you're in a situation as this. And then they also had the General Flynn disaster going. So when you start talking about this, and the census director has quit. Was looming for 2020. His name is John Thompson. He resigned, which surprised experts at the Census Bureau. So in other words, you have a totally dysfunctional administration that was dysfunctional to begin with. He served as director since 2013. Worked for the Bureau for 27 years, and he'll be leaving in June. So it's funding. It's been funding. This is our EPA story. The same thing. No successor to Mr. Thompson has been announced. However, Congress approved only $1.47 billion for the Census Bureau as for this year, fiscal 2017, about 10% below what the Obama administration had requested. And it's not in the interest of the Republicans to get the true numbers, because that's what you use to appropriate things. Now, this is in announcing, this Wilbur Ross, another crony of DJ Trump's. So you have all of these things going at once here. The whole Washington scene is ripe for conjuncture. It's ripe for all kinds of innuendos to be floating around, period. Reuters has it, the chief sets off a political firestorm. And one of the things that drives Washington is, in fact, political firestorms. And that is there. And one of the things to remember is, in the FBI and all these agencies, there are career people. Now, some career FBI agents, no doubt, were aligned with Rudy Giuliani, the reactionary racist former mayor of New York, who was aligned with DJ Trump. So all these titles, subtitles, will start to come out as a coherent situation comes. Now, also, Carl Icahn is in here. Democratic senators want to probe his biofuel dealings. And in the Korean Republic, they have a new president there, progressive, wants to address the border situation with Democratic Republic, known here as the North. So there are many things going on. Let's go to the EPA finally. Oops. See where we are here. Okay. And we'll find it in a second here. Okay. Now, this is the EPA. It was an interesting article in Murray Jones. The other 100 days, 5 decades before Trump, the new EPA made America great again. Now, this is on New Year's Day, 1970. It was approved in December. Richard Nixon appeared in San Clemente, California, for the momentous signing of the National Environmental Policy Act. The congressional statute that formally recast the government's role from conserving the wilderness to protecting the health of the environment and the public in general. It was spurred on by Rachel Carlson's book, groundbreaking book, The Silent Spring. That was in 1962. Lady Bird Johnson beautifying the highway. There's no evidence of any indifference in San Clemente that day when it laid out his new vision. That was Tricky Dick. The 1970s absolutely must be the year when America paid its debt to the past by reclaiming the purity of the air, its water, and our living environment. That's what Richard Nixon said. It is literally now or never. The following months, the president moved quickly to fulfill his promise. In February, he rolled out on the president a 37-point plan on the environment. By April, he approved a suggestion from an advisory council to organize an independent agency. Now, it had been scattered at the time amongst 15 different agencies. The umbrella agency became the EPA, and they compared this to Trump's dismantling in his first 100 days. He appointed Mr. Ruckelshaus to be the head of the new agency. I think Ruckelshaus was 37 years old at the time, and this was new. Ruckelshaus, after his confirmation, he filed suit against Atlanta, Detroit, and Cleveland for polluting their rivers. And they were indeed polluters. Armco Steel was in there, Jones and Laughlin. I think they're basically gone now. And there were 10 regional EPA offices out there, and leading up to the 100 days, it focuses primarily on administrating and enforcing the Clean Air Act of 1970. So in other words, it took the Clean Air Act, and then the Clean Water Act wasn't enacted till 1972. So in other words, the 70s was the year for many, many things to happen. Ruckelshaus' first 100 days laid the foundation for the growth, as we talked about that, the Clean Air Act, the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, and various other things. Safe drinking water, that came in 1974. The Toxic Substances Control Act came in 1976, and Resource Conservation Recovery Act in 1976 also. A decade after stepping down, Ruckelshaus returned under Ronald Reagan. The first 28 days, and this is where another set of history, Ann Gorsuch, she is the mother of the right-wing Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. Now, she was forced out of office. Scandals, etc., forced her out, literally out of office. And now, let's see what we get here. Scott Pruitt is a nightmare, but Reagan's boss. This is Ann Gorsuch. Business was booming at Harry's Liquor and Wine. That's near the Environmental Protection Agency's headquarters. The people were partying weeks early. The administrator, Ann Gorsuch Buford, had resigned. She's dead now. A ballooning controversy over management of a Superfund project, in which she was a thief. I survived the Ice Queen's acid rain. That was a big sign I put out there. It was only a decade old when she took over, and she became the first female administrator. She was a conservative nutcase from Colorado. She had been in the legislature there, and went to Washington was her story. So this Gorsuch, Neil Gorsuch, came up around a number of nuts. Now this Pruitt was saying now he filed 14 suits against the EPA. And from the New York Times here, Gorsuch and Reagan cut the agency's budget by a quarter, same thing Trump's doing, its workforce by 20%. She had a relaxed attitude towards enforcement when the New Mexico oil finally complained in a private meeting that it couldn't afford to comply there. Gorsuch told the company it wouldn't be penalized for flaunting the rules. And this is the same thing that's happening out in Washington State. The Hanford reactor out there, very old reactor, has had some trouble in this week. So those things are revisiting us. The ghost of Gorsuch, we'll call it. She resigned in 1983. That was when Ruckelshaus was brought back once again to take over the agency. Republican president since Reagan, George H.W. Bush and G.W., mostly chosen who were expert environmentalists. These were administrators who were consistent there. Now this Pruitt character is just no more than a political patsy, period. Oh yeah, and this character here too, her ideological brother, a character named James Watts. He was the Interior Secretary, were part of the vanguard of conservative resistance to landmark environmental laws. But now this resistance was formatted by monopoly business as it exists at that time. And then came the 74 election, what they call the Gingrich Revolution, the contract on America. That's when the party got more purity in its hostility towards environmental regulations. But today it's on a steroid. So in other words, we have this entire backdrop here. Very, very bad situation. This has forced the progressive forces literally to be divided up and have to regroup onto such people as Dan Rather, because you have the environmental people with the scientists that were the Science March, had a Women's March, and now more marches, and this will consolidate as we move along. Bupa died in, 2004. That's enough to say about her. And this is actually from the New York Times. President signs bill to cut auto fumes by 90% by 1977. That was what Tricky Dick signed. He started it. And one that was not invited to it was the late Ed Muskie. He was a Democrat potential rival in 1972. We know how that turned out. And Gerald Warren, deputy, told Newsman. Warren said the Congress had been represented by the chair and ranking a member on the committee. And that was, let's see, at the time, Jennings Randolph. He was a Democrat from West Virginia. Well, he's still there, Meacham. And from Kentucky, there's a fellow named John Sherman Cooper. He was more progressive type person. Haley Stagers from West Virginia. But you no longer have these types of people out there. The measure gave the automobile industry until 1975 to reduce emissions of hydrocarbons, and they're still arguing about that. Ruckelshaus here, this is in the Times, was the enforcer. He was very good at what he did. Also, the Clean Air Act provided for enforcement, and this is what the Republicans are attempting to dismantle now. International Financial Institution Bill, U.S. quotas and subscriptions to the International Monetary Fund, the Inter-American Development Bank. Nixon, in a statement, refused by Congress to provide $100 million for Pacific Asian Development Fund. So there were a lot of things going on here. Nixon, in fact, actually was forced to sign the Freedom of Information Act, too. So the Disaster Act, the Federal Highway Act amendment authorized $14.8 billion for highway safety mass transit. Amendments to the Library Service and Construction Act, 1976, authorized $207 million in that year. He signed the Poison Prevention Act. So Nixon did a lot of things that you can see as constructive things. Let's do the sports now. Not sure how we're running in terms of time. I don't have that screen up, but we'll just move on to sports and we can kind of backtrack. But that is the EPA. Where the EPA came in the 70s was a progressive era brought on by another crisis, and of course that crisis being Watergate. And one thing that happens around these various crisis that you enter into is what we're in now. There's always a sidebar. Progressive activity does get done in some of the worst possible situations out there. For the NBA in overtime, the Rockets and Spurs in San Antonio, the score 110 to 107, and San Antonio leads it 3-2. That is from the NBA on to Major League Baseball. And we'll see where the teams are today. Nonetheless, the Cubbies and Rockies out in Denver. Cubbies wish they would have stayed in Wrigley Field. 10-4 was the score of Rockies over poor Cubbies. And Jake Arrieta lost the game. Anyway, the Rangers were in San Diego, and they shut out the Padres 11-zip. And in 12, the National Orioles in Camden Park. The Orioles won 5-4. The Orioles had 12 hits, no errors, and the National 8 hits and 1 error. Dusty Baker's team. The Mariners were in Philadelphia on the opposite coast, probably trying to escape the nuclear plant there. But nonetheless, 10-9 was the score. Seattle pulled that one out. Cleveland was in Toronto, 6-0. Cleveland over Toronto. The Yankees were in Cincy. The Reds 5-3. Cry your heart out there, Holly. Anyway, the Giants were in New York. Mets 6-1. The reactionary, evidently, what was his name? We'll get it later. Tebow is in the Mets farm system. Unfortunate. The Cardinals were in Florida. Cardinals 6-5 over the Mets. And in 12, the Royals were also in Florida. Royals 7-6. The Red Sox were in Milwaukee, in which they would have stayed in Fenway Park. The Brewers didn't drink too much beer, so 11-5 was the score there. The Twins were on the south side of Chicago, 7-2 Twins over the White Sox. Atlanta was in Houston, 8-3 Houston over Atlanta. And the Cubs and Rockies, evidently in the second game, 8-1 was the score there. So the Cubbies did get some revenge. We have John Lackey. Somehow we skipped the Tigers. Anyway, let's get these. The Pirates and Dodgers in Los Angeles in 10. Dodgers pulled that one out. 4-3. The Angels and Athletics in Oakland. Angels 7-3 over Oakland. And see if I can get... okay, Tigers and D-backs in Arizona. Tigers 7-3. On to the National Hockey League. They're in playoff mode also. And we'll see where we are with the National Hockey League. The one game, the Senators and Rangers. Senators 4-2 over the Rangers. And this was the Eastern Conference second round, Game 6. The Senators win the series 4-2. So bye-bye Rangers. New York didn't do that well last night. It happens occasionally. And let's go back here as we are actually live. We'll do a lot of live broadcasts, but we are live in this particular instance. And so we go, as they say. The title of of this episode, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, for WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. This is a Boston Red. Shall return in this tsunami of political activity. No doubt there's a lot of information out there for one to simply just pull out of the sky. Strange indeed, is it not? Good day.